So this month's topic is game development with Gosu and Ruby. The most common known use of Ruby is for web development, most commonly within Rails. And developing web applications with Rails is really cool and everything. However, it overshadows some of the other uses of Ruby. Ruby is a really cool language. You can use it for a lot of different things, including developing games with Gosu. Gosu is a gem within Ruby that is designed specifically to make it easy to develop games within Ruby. However, it's not really that well known even within the Ruby community. So hopefully this can help bring some attention to it. So I'm just going to start off by going over why you would want to learn to program games within Ruby and within Gosu. So a good reason is that it'll make you a better programmer. When most of us, me personally, I spend most of my time with Ruby developing in Rails, and that's probably true for a lot of you here, at least the ones who develop with Ruby. And and developing within Rails is great, but you kind of get into a certain pattern when you're doing it, and it can be hard to break outside of that kind of mode of thinking. But if you're developing games, that kind of forces you to think about programming from an entirely different angle, and so that can help you become more well-rounded in your programming. And when you're developing with Gosu, it gives you a chance to work directly with pure objects rather than having classes within Rails where all the functionality is inherited. So it can help you gain like a more deeper understanding of how object-oriented programming works within Ruby and some of the other features of the language that you might not come across when you're developing with web applications every day. Also, you don't necessarily need to know anything about graphics or be good with that sort of thing. Gosu makes it really easy to import graphics into your game. So there's ones that you can get online, both for free and ones that you can pay for. And also, if you have a friend who's good at working with graphics, it'd be really easy to collaborate with them, and they could build it in something like Illustrator and then just hand the file to you, and then you could use it inside your game. Also, if you want to go on to develop games in a different platform, like for HTML5 or mobile, or even for like console games, a lot of the knowledge that you'll gain doing development within Ruby and Gosu, you'll be able to transfer over because a lot of the concepts will be the same. You'll just be using a different language in a different library. Also, developing web apps, they're really powerful, and it can be incredibly useful. However, for non-technical people, it doesn't really have the wow factor. You could spend months working on a web application and get everything working perfectly, and you optimize your database and everything, and you show it to one of your non-technical friends or family members, and they'll say, oh, that's nice. But you could spend like 3 hours working on a game and show it to them, and they'll be like, oh wow, that's awesome. That's really cool. So that's one good reason to do it, just to be able to show off. Also, it also has the wow factor for you. Most of us like playing computer games, and this gives you a chance to develop it and then play the games that you developed. And if you're having fun programming, that's can make it a lot easier to get better as well. So there's some good reasons to learn to programming with Gosu. So just to give a brief overview of some of the features of Gosu, one cool thing about it is that most of the underlying code is written in C++. Ruby does a lot of things well, but however, performance isn't one of them. But with most of the underlying code being in C++, this actually gives it an acceptable level of performance when you're developing with it. Because if it was the entire thing was in Ruby, it'd probably be really slow. And it's also important to note that the C++ code was written specifically for this gem, so everything's packaged nicely together. It's not like they just took an existing C++ library and threw some Ruby wrappers on top of it. And you can even develop with the C++ code directly, so you could port either parts of it or your entire game over to C++ after you've developed in Ruby if you really want that performance. Gosu makes it really easy to import and then render images and then use them within your game. So, as I was saying, this is what makes it easy to use existing images, and you don't have to worry about being able to draw everything on the screen yourself necessarily. Gosu makes it easy to do sprite animation, and this is a technique that's dates all the way back to like the original Nintendo games. Sprite animations is basically like using a flip book, you just take a series of images and then it gets displayed in succession on the screen. And so you can make it look like a character is running across the screen or jumping and that sort of thing. So that was kind of like the technique to make it look like Mario was running and then jumping and doing all that crazy stuff. Gosu makes it easy to import sound files into your game and then use them as either sound effects or background music. So you could play the sound just once to use it as a sound effect, or just play it in a continuous loop if you want to have it as background music. And you can deal with different input devices pretty easily. You can use keyboard, mouse, or certain gamepad controllers. They can connect to your computer, so you're not confined to just doing everything on the keyboard. And it is written in a way that makes it easy to handle these interactions as well. And it's compatible on whatever platform you're using. You can install and get Gosu up and running. There are probably some libraries that you would have to install along with it, but it's pretty easy to do on Linux. And I've looked at the instructions for Mac, and it seemed pretty manageable. And with Windows, there's actually something you can download to an installer you can download to do everything for you. So you can get it up and running on any platform. So that's pretty cool as well. There's a lot you can do with Gosu itself, and then there's also some gems you can use along with it to boost its functionality. There's Chipmunk, which is the physics engine. You don't really need this when you're developing a game, but if you're doing any kind of advanced physics, it's a lot easier to use a library that's going to do it for you than try to do all that math yourself. There's a couple of image manipulation libraries, TextPlay or RMagic. If you use Rails for web development, you might be familiar with RMagic. This allows you to do image manipulation within your game. So after you've imported the image, you can then manipulate it on the fly within your game. So that's pretty cool. And one of the demonstrations that I'll be showing later, I'll show you how that could be useful. So there's a gem called OpenGL. OpenGL is a 3D graphics library that's used to power a lot of popular games. And there's a gem for Ruby called OpenGL that allows you to use 3D graphics within your game. However, with Ruby being not the fastest language, you probably wouldn't be able to go too far in terms of developing with 3D graphics inside of it. But you could do some stuff in terms of generating backgrounds that are 3D and that sort of thing. Also, there's a gem that makes it possible for you to release your games for either Mac or Windows. So this way, it'd be easy to send it to your family or friends, or put it online for someone to download. You wouldn't have to, say, okay, send it to your buddy and say, okay, you just need to install Ruby and then download these libraries and everything. You just send them the files for your game. So the main class that you're going to use in every single Gosu game that you write is called Gosu Window, and as the name implies, it controls. It creates and then the window on your screen and then controls all the interactions with it. And the initialize method is the method that will create the window on your screen, in addition to doing the usual things you do in an initialize method in terms of populating variables and that sort of thing. And then after the window is initialized, it enters a continuous loop, waiting for the user to interact with it and then responding to those interactions. And there's two methods there's two class methods, or methods on the class, I should say, that get called. There's update and then draw. Update is where you should put all the the main logic for your game. And then draw is what actually renders everything on the screen and changes all of that as your game is being played. And then the other one that you're going to use a lot is called button down. As the name implies, this handles any of events of the user pressing the button. And then there's other callbacks that you can use to control the gameplay. And so if you have experience developing with JavaScript inside the browser, you can think of the update and draw methods as being like using set timeout to call the same function in a loop over and over again, except there isn't the timeout in this case being when the window is closed. Like that loop's going to keep running as long as the window is open. And then you can think of button down as like using like binding an event handler to an event within JavaScript. This would be like having the keyboard down event on or in JavaScript.
you like set a frame rate or something, and then that calls update?
Well, there's a default frame rate, which escapes me at a moment. You can change like the rate at which the window gets updated, but then you can also just like use math logic within the methods itself to control like how fast everything moves on the screen and that sort of thing. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's the end of the slides. So I'll go into some of the demo stuff.
So how did you learn about it, since it's a lesser known?
I was bored one night and I wanted to see if there was any good Ruby game library, so I Googled it, and there's a book that I found. There's a copy of it on the counter back there that's pretty good. So yeah, I just kind of stumbled upon it, and then I was, hey, there's actually something pretty good. I was actually a little surprised to find out there's something like this. Okay, so this isn't really much of a game. It's just more to demonstrate the capabilities of Gosu. So this is just an image of a wheel that's being imported, and then right now the loop is running. Nothing's really happening though until I press the space bar, which starts the wheel running. And then when I stop it, it plays the braking sound effect. So nothing too spectacular, but it's just there to kind of illustrate some of the concepts behind it. So this is the code that's making that run. So as you can see, the wheel class is inheriting from Gosu window, and then the initialize method here, you can see the first thing that's being done is calling the super, which calls it the initialize method on the parent class, and then passing in 800 and 600, which is the dimensions of the window. And then here I'm creating the image instance variable, which is just the Gosu image class, importing the wheel file, the file for the wheel image, and then just populating some variables here, and then down here is creating the brake sound. So you can see here in image, I'm calling draw rotation or draw rotate, which rotates the image, and then inside of update it says if active, increment these variables by this value. So but that only if the active variable is true. So then, as you can see up here, the active variable is initialized to false. So when the window gets opened, nothing's happening. And it isn't, so the button down method, excuse me, the button down method down here is what handles the event of me pressing the space bar to make it run. So first thing is to check whether the button that's being pressed is the space bar, and if it is, it goes into this conditional. So if active is true, it says active to false and then plays the brake sound. So that's what happens when you're stopping the wheel. It stops moving on the screen as well as playing the brake sound. And then down here, if it isn't moving, it just sets active to true, which then gets the wheel to move up here. So and then down here, I just have if the escape button is pressed to close the window. So, just to do the demonstration once more, you can see how that this just lays out a really bare bones basic example of how you can use Gosu to create a window and then have images on there and then handle keyboard interactions. Even though this isn't that exciting in itself. So
go through the parameters of the method that's drawing this.
Well, there is no.
Draw rotate.
Oh yeah. So yeah, the x is the x value on the x-axis. So that's like where it is, bottom to top, and then these just kind of create it, and x handles the x-axis. So as this one gets incremented, that's what's moving it to the right across the screen, and then the y value stays the same. And then when the x value or the angle value is getting incremented, that's what makes it looks like it's being rotated. So you can see like down here, this is where they're getting incremented, and then the next time the method gets called after these values have been incremented is when this method gets called with the new values, which makes it look like it's moving.
What's the 100?
This is an old presentation that I've reworked, so I don't.
Make it 200 and then run it.
Yeah.
Make it 1,000. Let's make it a super.
Yeah. Why not?
Not zero.
Can't actually tell.
Yeah, I don't think it's that important. But yeah, just to kind of illustrate how everything's just an illusion, I'm going to make the wheel spin in the wrong direction. Yeah, just to screw with everyone's heads. So there's here. I'm going to go over some examples. I didn't write these. These are just something that I found on GitHub. These are just some open source examples some people worked on. Did you have a question?
Before you go to that, where do you go to find the sounds? Is there a library that you...
I Googled break sound and I found that. Yeah, I mean, there's, I guess, some libraries where you can get some free sounds. It just depends on what you're looking for.
Okay.
But it's not something I've really dug into that deeply.
Well, I know it's an old presentation, but when you created this, did you just say, well, I need a break sound, so I'm going to do break_sound?
Well, I went on Google and found a break sound file and then just downloaded it and put it in here. So
Okay, gotcha.
yeah.
How was that referenced actually? Was it just like a file inside that same folder, or like
Yeah, I mean it's
sound/break?
yeah.
Oh,
So
I gotcha.
I downloaded the file and then dropped it into the folder, and that's where it's being loaded into here.
There are lots of websites with the graphics and sounds from old games like Zelda and stuff. So
Yeah.
you can make a little clone and just go and get the jumping sound and all that stuff.
Okay, so these are some of the examples I'm just going to show to demonstrate some of the different capabilities. So this one is called Captain Ruby. It incorporates like some physics engine stuff, and it's using a sprite to animate the character. So this, this is kind of the beginnings of a pretty awesome side-scrolling game, and so this shows like how you could start with something like this and add on to it to come up with something pretty inventive.
Can we see the physics? I'm just curious what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean I can show you what the there's a lot of code that goes into it, so that's so there's that.
But it's all done.
Well, the top code, yeah. So there's that. This is the OpenGL integration, so you can see how the background is in 3D. So that's pretty cool.
That's the physics one. Chipmunk is the physics.
Yeah. So this one's cool. Is all these images are being created and rendered through RMagic. These aren't images that are being loaded from a file. And then Chipmunk is being used to control like how all of these little squares interact. And
You want to come and shake your laptop?
yeah, like it's an ant farm. So yeah, that's pretty cool. It's doing a pretty good job of handling all these different things. So there's that. So this game might look kind of familiar. There was some games like this that were kind of popular in the 90s. So it's showing how you can use RMagic to manipulate the images on the fly, and so you can shoot holes in the stars and so forth. What else? So I'm not entirely honest. Like what I think the main thing that Chipmunk is doing here is controlling like the interactions between the spaceship and the stars. So yeah. Any of the other ones?
Yeah, this stuff is hard to do by yourself if you want to have inertia and
Oh yeah.
slowing down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
It's
like
a lot easier if you just
like you can see.
accelerate and do the right thing. Here's the mass of this.
Yeah, it's like after I take my finger off the arrow, it doesn't stop right away. It just kind of gradually comes to the stop. That's pretty cool. Any ones that I'm missing? No, I think that's pretty much it. So yeah, that's